Deadline has a new article out talking about the current industry estimates for the Rise of Skywalker domestic open. They claim that right now the current industry averages are about $205 million. Now, the article does go on to say that the low end of the estimate's $175 million. They don't actually specifically list what the high end is right now. But again, the average is $205 million. If it does get a $205 million open, that would be the 7th biggest open ever in the North American market. That would place it slightly above Black Panther with its $202 million and slightly under the Avengers with its $207 million, and underneath the 4th best film there, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi's $220 million. This article, like many articles coming out more recently, are actually finally being honest and saying that The Last Jedi has harmed the Star Wars brand. Originally, they would point to the $1.3 billion it earned worldwide and point to its 4th biggest domestic open and say the film was a massive success, and it's only trolls and bigots and haters that are actually complaining about The Last Jedi. Well, you just can't ignore the evidence that Star Wars has been hurt by The Last Jedi, and this article does go on to say that should the early reviews of The Rise of Skywalker come out saying that things are back on track and it's managed to fix the flaws from The Last Jedi, then the sky's the limit for how much money it'll earn on its opening weekend. I do agree with that if the early reviews do come out and say that Rise of Skywalker has fixed the Disney trilogy, it is back on track, it has fixed all the flaws of The Last Jedi and the film is excellent, then we may very well be looking at the 2nd biggest domestic open ever. Still be behind Avengers Endgame, I think. I think it's probably nearly impossible, no matter how good the reviews are, for it to beat Avengers Endgame in the North American market, but it certainly could beat Infinity War and The Force Awakens to become the 2nd biggest open ever in the US domestic market. Now, having said that, I don't think the film can fix all the problems with The Last Jedi, and should the early reviews say that, I would be highly skeptical that they're just shilling for Disney. But nonetheless, if the reviews do claim that, that would get enough hype again to propel the film perhaps to having the 2nd biggest open ever. Now, on the worldwide stage, we're not going to see fantastic things from The Rise of Skywalker because the Chinese market doesn't like Star Wars. They don't care for the Disney trilogy. They don't care for any of the Star Wars stuff at all. I think The Last Jedi made a total of $40 million in China. I might have to check on that to see if that's correct. But it made a very, very, very low amount of money compared to what it earned in the US domestic market. So Rise of Skywalker will be no different at all. It will effectively flop in China, which will hurt any chance of it getting any kind of worldwide open records. It'll get big money, but it's definitely not going to break records because the Chinese market does not like Star Wars. This chart here shows the interest on YouTube, or the YouTube viewership, of the final trailer for The Last Jedi compared to the final trailer of The Rise of Skywalker. So we've got the red line there is above the blue line, so it's a very simplified way that we can see that interest in The Rise of Skywalker is lagging behind interest of The Last Jedi on YouTube. Both these trailers were released about 2 months before the film was released, so they give a good like-for-like comparison. If we change the chart to just show the percentage difference between the viewership of the Rise of Skywalker trailer and the Last Jedi trailer, we can see that it spikes up, it curls around, and then the red arrow indicates where The Mandalorian was released. And you can see in the top chart that interest actually goes up from that point relative to where its interest was beforehand. The chart at the bottom is the same chart but zoomed in a lot more at the same point. The red arrow still points at where The Mandalorian was released, and you can see that it was a lot flatter and then it increases its angle up. So that shows a fairly dramatic increase in the general interest in The Rise of Skywalker that coincides with The Mandalorian actually running. So The Mandalorian does seem to be, in a roundabout way, repairing some of the damage to the Star Wars brand. It is going to help with the box office, or at least the opening weekend box office of The Rise of Skywalker, but The Rise of Skywalker is still lagging behind The Last Jedi in total interest at this point in time. TheNumbers.com has an interesting North American inflation-adjusted list where they only have films from 1977 onwards. So they are missing films like Jaws from 1976. They're missing Gone with the Wind, the biggest inflation-adjusted film ever in the North American market. But it does condense some of the records here so that we can fit more of the Star Wars films on one screen. So we have the number one film here. Again, it's not number one. Gone with the Wind is number one with inflation, but the number one film here since 1977 is Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, $1.49 billion. And down the bottom list here, I've chopped it off at number 39, where we have Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. There are two Star Wars movies not on this list. Attack of the Clones didn't make it, and Solo: A Star Wars Story most definitely did not make it in the largest inflation-adjusted box offices ever. The interesting film here, I think, is what's in at number 6, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I do believe that Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson tried to claim that although The Last Jedi wasn't liked by a lot of people, it was the middle film in a trilogy, and nobody liked The Empire Strikes Back when it was first released, and it was also the middle film in the first trilogy. Well, I think having the 6th biggest film ever in inflation-adjusted terms probably shows that The Empire Strikes Back was liked when it was first released, and it didn't actually have any kind of major backlash. As we get closer and closer to the actual open of The Rise of Skywalker, we'll get far more accurate advance ticket sales numbers, which will let us have a much better estimate than the $190 million I had in my last video and the $205 million average that Deadline is reporting here. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.